Welcome to the HITea With Grace podcast, where we spill the tea on HIT. Just got back from ASCO today, and I'm honored to welcome to the pod Kathryn Doornbos. She's the Director of Clinical Partnerships at Carta Healthcare. Thanks for joining me, Kathryn.
Yeah, elated to be here. I am fresh off of ASCO myself, so I think we're going to have a lot of exciting things to talk about. It was a great year.
Absolutely. So she was telling me about this exciting piece of research while we were at ASCO, and I just had to have her on the pod to tell me more about it. But first, before we dive into that, tell me a little bit about the career path that brought you to your role today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had a little bit unconventional of a career path, but I think that's common for many of us. There's windy roads that get us to where we are. I have a scientific background. I ultimately have a PhD in molecular biology, expected to be an academic researcher, set up all of my education to go that direction, and then realized in that process that I was really lonely. And I wanted to have a better impact on patients more quickly. I really wanted to be out in the wild as opposed to being in the lab with a pipette sort of 30 years down the line, the work that I was doing impacting patients. I wanted a little bit shorter of a timeline. So I went into industry. I previously worked for a company called Foundation Medicine. They are one of the cornerstone providers of genomic profiling for oncology patients. And then I transitioned to Carta Healthcare. At the time, it was Realize Intelligence. And so I've just had a great trajectory. I'm so excited to have landed in IT and health IT, but I have a lot to learn. So I'm, as I said, scientist background. So I kind of marry both, and I'm learning along the way, and it's very exciting.
That is awesome. So let's get nerdy. Let's talk about the study. What were some of the key findings about overtreatment in older women with breast cancer? And why is that so important right now?
Yeah, so I think that we had a study last year in JCO-CCI, and it demonstrated the value of identifying a precise population of patients who may not benefit from a biopsy event. And these are sentinel lymph node biopsies. They are routine care in breast cancer because they help identify whether cancer has metastasized beyond the breast. But there are complications from this surgery sometimes. Sometimes patients have lymphedema, sometimes they have mobility issues in their arms, and that can cause lifetime trouble. And if you don't need to have the surgery, you shouldn't have it. And so there was new surgical guidelines that identified that certain patients with low-grade disease above a certain age with a certain genomic profile would benefit from surgical de-escalation. And so in our first publication, we validated that we could identify those patients at scale using our technology, using the unstructured record in the patient EHR to identify all of those nuances, just like you would for a clinical trial. And then we actually took it a step further and we brought that into the wild. We deployed a real-time EHR nudge in Epic, a very gentle flag to breast surgeons to say, hi, this patient meets guidelines for surgical de-escalation, but we see that you're scheduling a surgery. Maybe double think that, right? And it allowed them to explore the guidelines, to be reminded of it during their busy days, and to make a decision that was right for that patient. Because really personalized care is where we're going. I think that's what lights me up in oncology. It's why I work in oncology today. It's why I want to spend my career in oncology, is the potential of personalized care. And so this allowed us to use technology to deploy personalized care at scale. The health system that we did this at is still using this tool, and they've seen a reduction in all of those nasty side effects from surgery because surgeons appreciate being reminded that surgery maybe isn't necessary for a specific population of patients. A really cool thing that happened, not something that we planned, was in our second publication, which was in JAMA Surgery. There was also an invited commentary that was just, hey, surgeons, how did it feel to get a nudge in the EHR? Was this too much? Was it like a bat of paternalism, or was it the featherlight touch that you needed to just get a reminder? And surgeons were overwhelmingly positive. They said, we appreciated the reminder. It's hard out there. As an oncologist, as a clinician, there's so much new information. Guidelines are changing at an exponential pace. And just having that little reminder helps them feel really confident in the decisions that they're making with patients and have higher quality conversations with those patients. So that's the study. We enabled it from a technology perspective, but it wouldn't happen with the incredible clinicians and those human-to-human interactions. So I think that's a theme that we really lean hard into. So
I love when you're able to use data and analytics and healthcare technology in that way to just completely empower better care decisions, better diagnosis decisions, better treatment decisions. I mean, all of it is just incredible. So what an amazing thing to be a part of, to be using your science background to do this tremendous research and make this a tremendous impact. So I heard that working with UPMC's Hillman Cancer Center, you were able to cut patient screening time from over an hour to just 1 minute. How is that even possible?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So I think just to provide a little bit of background, cancer clinical trials are increasingly complicated, and very few adult cancer patients participate in clinical trials for a whole variety of reasons. And it's really only 5 to 7% of patients end up participating in a clinical trial, even though when you go to NCCN guidelines, on every single page of an NCCN guideline, it underscores that the best standard of care for a patient is a clinical trial. So there's a huge disconnect there, right? And the field recognizes it, clinicians recognize it, patients recognize it. And so we're all trying to do better by getting more patients the opportunity of research as care. And so really what we've found is that one of the many barriers to clinical trial participation is that these oncology trials are super complicated. The inclusion-exclusion criteria is pages long. Think 60 to 70 criteria that are hyper specific about the clinical realities for that patient, genomic testing, surgical status, line of therapy, all of that. And so it takes a lot of time to proactively identify those patients. And this is a spot where technology can really help, because we've developed this incredible tool, goes into the unstructured notes in a patient's electronic health record and understands the patient's trajectory like a clinician would. So it's able to pull out all that information, highlight it for a clinical research specialist to review, and then they can much more quickly identify those patients that are the highest probability to be a good candidate for trials. And so it's really that pre-screening moment where we see all of that efficiency, because we're able to pre-screen patients at scale instead of just going by the chart and screening as many patients as you can in the 2 hours that you have to do it. You're presented with a pre-triage list of high probability patients, and therefore it just stacks that efficiency. Now, there's still a lot of last mile things to get a patient on a trial. There's still an immense amount of informed consent and understanding a patient's transportation situation and understanding if they really even want to participate in research. But this technology liberates those clinical research specialists to have those human-to-human conversations that technology will never be able to replace.
Yeah. So are you using AI to do this? What kind of technology is being used to do?
Yeah. So it's artificial intelligence, but it's really precisely applied. It's clinician trained, it's natural language processing, it's a small language model, and then it's normalizing everything to clinical definitions and standards that allow it to be queryable in a way that makes it very easy to scale. We don't have to retrain for trials. We really have built this very robust oncology model, and then we get hyper specific, whether it's a breast cancer patient or a prostate cancer patient or a lung patient. There are different models for those patient populations because there are different nuances in how a clinician writes notes, even for any of those patients, to how information is recorded, to the lines of therapy, like Pembro or Keytruda may be used in a different line of therapy across different diseases. And so the models are really smart to know that. And then we update based on new standards, new guidelines, et cetera, so that the information that we're abstracting is always up to date.
Are there any surprising challenges that you guys had when you were rolling this kind of approach out? Were they technological, clinical, cultural? What did you have to overcome to push this into reality?
Yeah, so I think one of the big ones is change management with clinicians and helping them understand that this technology is not at all designed to replace the incredible work that they do. It's really meant to empower them to do more of the human-to-human work that technology will never replace, right? And it's also making sure that they understand how transparently we've built the system. One of the key features of the software is being able to go directly into the primary source of the patient electronic health record. There's no black box. We highlight exactly what we've found, the context around it, to make sure that that can be validated by a human, right? Because we're under no presumption that the technology is always going to be right. We just want to surface the information for a professional clinical eye to assess very quickly. And so it's really managing those expectations, helping them understand maybe how to change their workflows or their presumptions about AI, or how they are thinking about screening patients to best use the technology. That's always the challenge. I think it's going to be the challenge for a while until artificial intelligence and technology like this earns trust. I think we have a runway to buy with clinicians. And I think every individual is sort of at a different stage there in how they think about it. So just being really sensitive to that and meeting them where they are and finding the wins where we can.
Absolutely. So you worked for Realize Intelligence for a while, and they were acquired by Carta Healthcare. So what does that marriage look like? What is Carta Healthcare, and how do you guys fit into the family now?
Absolutely. So we are huge believers that data is the single source of truth in healthcare, and that is, it is the fuel of innovation in healthcare. And Carta and Realize believe that at our core. And we really married to bring our unified technologies to more patients, more clinicians, and more health systems. So it's really a very simple marriage. I think that there's incredible amounts of collaboration that are already happening. And I think that we are just really fortunate to sort of have found each other out in a very sort of busy and a lot of stakeholders. And I think that we also have great culture that marries together. So
that's great to hear. So are there any upcoming projects or partnerships you're really excited about that you're allowed to talk about? Or what innovations are exciting you in this space as we're looking forward 5-10 years?
Yeah, I think just seeing more health systems deploy these tools is very exciting, because we learn from each deployment, we learn from each partnership. And I think what we're recognizing is that when we present the patient first and that promise of research as care first, we can see really amazing things happen. So one of the things that we're really proud of is that we've been able to help health systems screen patients out in the community, not just at these academic core NCI designated cancer centers, but to meet patients where they are and then help them sort of identify, oh my goodness, we have patients at this distant community site that are very willing to participate in research, and that opens up the possibility of caring for more patients in new ways. And that is some of the most rewarding insights that we can provide a health system, and we're immensely proud of that. We also just love the fact that by enabling pre-screening at scale of patients, we're taking away any of those intrinsic biases that may be present. Sometimes it's really difficult to talk to patients about participating in research, or there's assumptions that clinicians and the patients themselves make about what research is that kind of become meaningless when the patient is an absolute match for a clinical trial. And you can just say, look, we know that you're a good candidate for this. This is not a theoretical. This is a true and hardened option for you at this moment in your care. And let's have a conversation about enabling you to be able to take advantage of that. And I think that those things are just very exciting. We play a very small role in them. I really want to emphasize that we're just trying to make clinicians and clinical research specialists the heroes in these stories. So we are not directly interfacing with patients in any way, but just hearing some of the feedback from when they're able to have those conversations is super, super rewarding.
I can only imagine that. It really plays into this whole trend in the space of clinical research as a care option. They call it PRACO, right? Where patients are just more empowered the more information they have. When they do not have information about clinical trials that they are perfect matches for, they are not empowered. They are disempowered. So this is critical for the entire industry to get on board. If you are a doctor or a nurse looking to get into the industry, you need to expect it from your health systems that they are using a program like this to make sure patients are having all of the data possible to be able to make the care decisions and research decisions they they want to make. So thank you so much, Kathryn. I love learning from you. My listeners really love to hear about what's going on in space, but they also love to hear about you and what drives you as a leader. So tell me, what are things that you do in your personal life that help you work your best and make a difference?
Yeah, I think I always center myself on my why. In oncology, I think that you can imagine that 1 in 3 of us will be a cancer patient one day. And I think all of us are going to be touched by cancer at some point in our lives, be it being as a caregiver or having a friend who's affected or a family member. And I just saw a very dear friend of mine at ASCO. I hadn't connected with her for a while because we had moved away from one another, as happens. But her husband and her experience are my why. She lost her husband to really ugly metastatic colorectal cancer during COVID. And she is an oncology nurse herself. And she navigated him through multiple clinical trials, 5 lines of therapy, really incredible for a metastatic diagnosis. And I always think about how hard it was for Lana to navigate him. And she is literally an oncology professional. And we have to do better, right? And so just being a minuscule part of doing better is what motivates me. If I can give clinicians a tool to offer more patients the opportunity of research at care, that is wildly fulfilling to me. And so I just really try very hard to stay very close to my why. The work is hard. All of us overwork. All of us overextend ourselves. I am like on the verge of total exhaustion coming out of ASCO, but I am totally invigorated because I was reminded very intimately of my why this weekend. And I'm like, okay, like I know rest for the weary here, right? Like there is things to do. There are problems to solve. And the faster we do it, the more Joes are going to be out there. The more patients are going to be able to participate, have more birthdays, have more time with their family. And time is what matters in cancer. So the more I can sort of serve up opportunities for that on a platter, the more motivated I am each day.
If you could give your younger self a piece of advice, what would that be?
Adopt change sooner. I had this plan in my mind for becoming an academic researcher. I was actually in infectious disease at the time, and I really just held on to it so fervently for so long, and it's what got me through my graduate training. So I wouldn't change sort of my dedication to the idea of a future, but I would be willing to let myself see other possibilities sooner, because as an academic trained scientist, I was very much discouraged from exploring industry options. And I think that's a real disservice to graduate students. I think it's a real disservice to anyone training in the sciences, even at a bachelor or a master's level. It's not just for terminal degree students. It's really for anyone, because the incredible thing about industry is that you are at the tip of the spear of innovation in so many ways in that bench to bedside space, right? Be it small molecule development or R&D for a large pharma company or genomic testing or any of those things. Like you are just right there at the intersection of commercialization. And so you're impacting patients' lives in a really tangible way that is wildly fulfilling. And I wish a younger self had allowed myself to recognize that sooner.
Sounds like you were right on time, though. So I'm so thrilled you made it.
It's all good,
and we can learn from you. It's amazing. So to finish this conversation off right, where can our listeners find you online?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. think I'm one of the only Kathryn Doornbos on there. I have a unique last name, so you're welcome to find me. You can also find us at Carta.Healthcare. We're actually, by the time that this podcast releases, we're going to have an incredible new website, which our team has worked really hard on, has some great case studies, has some really cool podcasts and videos for you to check out about our work. So would love to see you there, would love to talk to you if you're a clinician. Also, always happy to just have conversations with other women in this space. I think I have a lot of mentors and a lot of just colleagues who I like to bat ideas around with and just say, hey, there may not be an opportunity for direct partnership, but I see what you're doing. I admire what you're doing, and I want to learn more about it to make me better. Always willing to have those conversations.
That's terrific. Now, before I forget, did you happen to bring tea with you today? And if so, tell me about your mug.
Of course. So it is a raggedy and it is hard to see, but it says cancer is complicated and helping is not. And this was an event that I helped to participate in Birmingham, Alabama. The event doesn't exist anymore, but it was for the Comprehensive Cancer Center there. But it is a mug that I cherish because I love that idea, right? This is a really complicated disease. It's really difficult. No single person is going to come to the table with all of the solutions, but we can all activate our own passions and our own innate abilities to make a little bit of a difference.
So inspiring. Thank you so much for joining us today and just being so generous with your wisdom with us.
I appreciate you, Grace. Thank you so much. And I hope you get caught up on rest and restoration from ASCO.
Oh, goodness. I would appreciate that so much. As you all can imagine, ASCO was a wild ride. Amazing to be invited to so many events and see so many amazing innovators that are just pouring their heart and soul into oncology research and care. And I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for helping. And thanks to you folks for joining us too. Check out the HITea With Grace podcast for more interviews with great guests like Kathryn today. Cheers.
Like a Girl Media is more than a media network. It's a community. We want to meet you and amplify your voice and the voices of outstanding women innovating in healthcare. Interested in starting your own podcast or hosting an event near you? Connect with us online or in person. We're here to support and empower you.